So
it goes like that, and this goes like that. Yeah.
there we go.
So I don't know if people can hear.
They should be able to. I think they should be able to hear now.
Can I tell you a funny story once you figure this out?
You can. How about now? I am striking out. Oh man, always something fun.
Oh my God, the viewership is crashing.
Yeah, exactly. No. Let's see if the sound comes back in a second. There's always a little bit the delay. Yes. All right. We did it. Because this is what happens when Craig is not here. Things don't work. Now here we go. How to motivate yourself.
Yes. Okay. So let me start with the funny story.
Let's start with the funny story.
I was super motivated last year to start a podcast.
Okay.
And I started this podcast. I called it The Freestyle Way, and I had exactly this mic.
Yeah.
The Blue Yeti mic, and you can see that when you look at this mic, you see that there's a red button there.
Yeah.
That means that we're recording.
Ah.
Okay, so it's live, and you have these different settings on the back that allows you to speak into the mic, just you, or you can have a guest,
different people on it.
Yeah. So it has these different functionalities. So I started recording this podcast on my own.
Yep.
And I was like, why is the sound so bad? And I just didn't know why the sound was so bad.
Yeah.
So I kept on getting closer and closer and closer to this mic.
So you're just like eating the mic.
Eating the mic. And guess what? I was basically speaking into it backwards. Like,
oh no!
Yeah. So it's kind of like speaking into the mic like this. That's what was happening.
I feel like that's what we were just doing.
Yes, that's exactly what we were doing.
Well, a good fortuitous start.
Oh, my goodness.
Guys, thank you for chiming in. Glad you can hear. Let's say hi to everyone who is here. Oh, man, look at this.
Wow.
Let's scroll up. Aiden is first. GD came out second. Bob third. Ooh, Dave tied for third. It's a thing, I guess, right? Islam Boy. Scott, how are you guys doing? Julie, David, Tanae, how are you guys? Paige, thanks for the look out there. Edward, how you doing? Holger, Carla. I love the names we get on here.
They're cool.
They're kind of cool, right? There's something. Jason Shaw, Scott, Anton, USA. Lee, how are you doing? Jenna, FOD runner, Andy, what's going on?
Are you only picking the names you can pronounce?
Kind of.
I'm just checking.
Just, a little.
Because half of the
bit
names I would have probably pronounced wrong.
Well, I can't. It's like Instagram usernames, right? Like you can't tell if it's like GoBilly7859.
Yeah, you don't know if that's the name.
Underscore dash hashtag. But anyway, excited to have you guys here. Excited to have Carl here. Carl and I have been friends for years. We have coached together in a lot of ways. Carl is who pushed me to start doing video.
Wow.
I remember 4th of July at your house, and you're like, dude, you need to start doing video.
And I've been pushing more people to do it. In fact, I had a guy today from the UK who just put out his video.
Really?
His first one, and he was so nervous, but it was great.
Dude, I was so nervous, guys. Like, I don't think you know. Like, I scheduled a time to do with our mutual friend Diane, and I remember texting her on a Tuesday. I was like, Diane, like in the middle of the afternoon when no one's in the gym, can you hold your phone up in front of me and just let me shoot some thing on squatting or something else?
I don't think I've ever seen your posture so up.
And I was just like,
yeah, you're there.
Cheeks were flushed and red. It was bad.
And here you are, a pro.
yeah, total pro right now. Pro amateur.
I mean, this is cool. You have 2 screens here. I feel like we're high production, a nice camera, audience who's interacting with you here.
I know.
It's amazing.
When the pieces all come together, it's quite nice.
Mm-hmm. What year was it that you did your first video?
The first video?
Mm-hmm.
I think the first video was, I want to say, 2014 or 2014?
So that's 5 years ago you did your first video, and then that was filmed on your iPhone.
That's filmed on an iPhone.
Yeah, and then you started doing more videos, and you started editing on iMovie.
Yes.
And you guys even launched your first product on the on TRE.
Yeah, fun fact is some of this is a little rehashing of the conversation that we had on Carl's The Freestyle Way podcast, which is into its third season.
Second season. I call it like the first official season.
First official.
The first season was pilot.
Yep.
But when you're on the podcasting platforms, there's no pilot season option there. So I had to go season 1. This is season 2.
I love it. Well, anyway, you've been releasing weekly. You've had some great guests on there, if I don't say so myself.
Yes, actually, you're up there. You're right now, I think, standing in second place as the most listened to episode. Yep. So you're crushing it.
But we had a lot of fun. We got to go into just like a lot of our history together. It's just super fun to like go back into that. And a lot of comments I got from that podcast was like, "Oh, Nate, I'd never like heard that from you before." And something like, "Why didn't you tell me?" And I'm like in the 3 minutes before class, it was like, when are we going to get to those levels of detail?
Oh, so that's cool. So people who you coach have listened to the podcast.
Yeah, so I actually was filming at Kezar Stadium on Tuesday, and one of my first athletes I ever coached, her name was Isabel. She came up to me, and she almost had this like righteous sense of indignity. And she's like, "I never knew all those things. How come you never told me?"
Did you say you never asked?
I didn't say that, but I thought it.
That's awesome. That makes my day because I think one of the things that I want the podcast to shed light on is on the conversations that are happening on the back end that are actually the catalyst for the things that we're putting out on the front end. Mm-hmm. And so far, one of the biggest realizations for me has been that up until now in my professional career as like a coach, my family has never paid attention to anything that I do. They kind of saw, here's Carl's book.
My family doesn't either.
Here's a New York Times bestseller. It doesn't mean anything to us. But all of a sudden, my mom's listening to the podcast. My dad's listening to the podcast. My sister is listening to. I'm just like, what? This is so cool. So, and my friends are listening to the podcast. So for the first time, people are listening, and it's because they are so keen on learning what is behind what looks like success on the front end. Yeah. And it's really inspiring. In fact, it is very motivating.
It is very motivating.
Was that a good segue?
I think that was a good segue. You know, I want to, before we get into today's main topic, I did want to touch on the beauty of podcasts, and the thing that I really enjoy about YouTube is that you can get into deeper topics, right? It is the deep end of the pool versus the shallow end of the pool.
You have been listening too.
I have been listening as well. And I actually wanted to talk specifically about your interview with Charlie Rocket. Mm-hmm. Now, setting this up, guys, for any of you who subscribed to Runner's World, I think it was last year, might have been in the summer.
Yeah, I think so. I forget. I think it was the August.
He was on the title of Runner's World, and this is an individual who he's really like used running and transformed his life. But it's not. He just has such a unique story. Like, what were some of the things that stood out for you in that story?
So, in a nutshell, this is a guy who, at a very young age, realized he loved business. Yeah. He was someone who was very creative. Yeah. And started getting into business within the music scene. Yeah. And he's from Atlanta, so he was surrounded by the hip-hop culture. He started trying to make videos and working with different artists in different ways. Eventually, at the age of 18, he becomes a manager, and he starts managing who was then known as Titty Boy, who is now known as 2 Chainz.
Do you think he like A/B tested the names on?
Well, that's the first thing he told me. He's like, you know what? You need to change your name. I'm 18, and that's the first thing I think we need to change.
That's incredible.
So, anyways, fast forward 10 years.
He's 18 and he's managing
a 30-plus-year-old.
Wow.
Yeah, I think 2 Chainz was 32 years old at the time. Kids, the whole thing, was under contract with a record label. Anyways, he takes over 10 years down the line. I think they make it to a $50 million business a year just in managing 2 Chainz.
And some of you guys may be super into hip-hop. Other of you guys may not have heard of 2 Chainz before, but this guy was touring globally multi-million followers on the social media channels for, take that for what it means. But then also, like, he won a Grammy?
I'm not sure. It was probably a Grammy nomination, or if he won a Grammy, I don't know. I don't want to say. Fact check. So where's your fact checker?
He's in Panama.
Doesn't matter. Bottom line is, he pursued business so hard that fast forward 10 years, he was overweight. He was over 300 pounds, and he had been diagnosed with a brain tumor. So he decided, I'm quitting this music business. I want to be what I dreamt of being as a kid, which was an athlete. But he was always this chubby kid. And he saw himself as someone who was just dreaming of being an athlete, but could never physically become one. So he decided, you know what? If I can manage a multi-million-dollar business like this and be creative, why can't I now transform from being, he was CEO Charlie, to
Charlie Rocket.
Yeah, he called himself Charlie Rocket, like, an athlete. And he started running as his first resource, and that just allowed him to have this thing that he could measure very easily. Okay, I can run down the block. I can run 2 blocks, 3 blocks. I can run 30 minutes.
It's amazing how it starts that way.
Incredible.
For you guys who take for granted that you can just run for 20 or 30 minutes easy, or if you think, oh man, if I can't get a 45-minute run in, it doesn't count, think back to that start where 20 minutes was an eternity. Right, and just running around a block once or twice, that was the thing.
And just the physical pain of carrying maybe the weight.
Yeah.
And then you're dealing now with your technical abilities versus your capacity to even just support your structure.
Yeah.
So anyways, he lost all this weight, and the way that he did it was he set goals. Like, okay, I'm going to try to complete a marathon. That would be a big goal. And I think Islam Boy is actually running a marathon tomorrow or this weekend.
And a name that some of you guys will know because he has a podcast himself, and I believe a YouTube channel, is Rich Roll.
Mm-hmm.
And so he reached out to Rich Roll, and I think Rich Roll helped him with some of his training because he went from marathon to Ironman.
Yep. He
became a vegan. Vegan for a little while?
Yeah, he became a vegan. He still is a vegan, I believe. He went into veganism coming out of this.
I think it's now called plant-based.
Plant-based, yeah.
Much way techno music is now called EDM.
That's right.
I learned that last week, guys.
You did?
Yeah. I was like crazy. People haven't said it techno since like 1999.
It's a European thing, I think.
Yeah.
It was techno was like a Euro.
Yeah.
Yeah, Euro slang. Anyways, so he lost all this weight, and this is what stuck out, is that he lost the weight, he reversed his brain tumor, he completed these marathons, he completed an Ironman in New Zealand.
He rode across the country. And I think he was supported by one of the lead production managers for Oprah. So he really got a lot of support. And he made a name for himself. And at the same time, he created this makeshift Nike ad. Yes.
That got him 6 months later featured in the Dream Crazy ad that Colin Kaepernick
was in.
Yeah, was in.
People.
Yeah. So he was in that as the common man athlete. So he had this dream of being a
sponsored
athlete.
But what was interesting about that conversation was initially, and this might tie into what his motivations were, it wasn't enough for him to be an athlete on his own. He needed to go through a process and where he was getting some public recognition for being an athlete. Like, it was very important to him, at least that was my impression, that he got this deal with Nike. Like, most of us don't walk around thinking like, oh man, if I don't have a deal with Nike, it doesn't mean I'm not a runner. But for him, maybe where he's coming from, there was something about that was like his, shoot for the moon sort of thing.
100%. And I think that's the big thing that came to me, was that he was very specific about how he wanted to see his results unfold. It wasn't about the time. It wasn't necessarily about the weight, but it was about how he felt and what were the things that he was going to do to feel that way.
Yeah.
And that was, okay, if I complete the marathon, I may feel a certain way.
Yeah.
How can I start feeling that way right now? If I want to be an athlete, what does being an athlete look like? Well, it looks like you're in commercials and you get paid to exercise, basically, or train or perform. So am I doing that? Yes. Okay, cool. I'm getting paid to be this athlete.
But this is so incredible. And I've seen this video before. It was a little while ago. I remember watching it over the summer. But then when I was just, recently listening to the podcast you did with Charlie Rocket, which just came out like 2 weeks ago.
Yeah, 2 weeks
ago.
Like
that. You guys should definitely listen to it. The beginning, 90 seconds you pull from the clip of this, and it just kind of gives you goosebumps, and it's incredible. And for a brand like Nike, think about how many people hit them up all the time. Hey, sponsor me. Look at me. Look at this. And like, how did he cut through the noise there? Like, how did he land maybe when other people didn't land? And like, what was the reaction on Nike campus? Because that to me was really incredible.
Yeah, I honestly don't know what that is, but he's the kind of guy that when you're around, you just feel like this guy is in it and he's with you, and he doesn't hear the noise of the world. He's on his own wavelength. And I think when someone does that and is aligned mentally, is aligned in their heart, like they're really passionate about it, and then it just feels right when they're doing it, stuff starts to happen. And he's that kind of guy. And it didn't happen overnight. Like, this guy had been going since he was 14 as an entrepreneur, working on these things, and had all these connections, and is very well versed in presentation and entertainment. And entertainment simply meaning holding focus. Yeah. So he understood music, he understood imagery, he understood voice, he understood inflection, he understood messaging, he understood specific code and words to use within the message. Right. So he had all the ingredients right. He's a master chef when it comes to entertainment. So that's what allowed,
he was able to put it. And people within the Nike campus were freaking out because they thought that at first, like, Nike had made that, right? It was almost like they're like, did we come out with something this cool? And it was just this guy who did it. Anyway, we could go on and on in this. This is super cool. Let's pull it back to, motivation in general, which is really what this thing is about. You've coached athletes for a long time, and you've worked with a lot of different types of athletes. Yeah. From, like, competitive CrossFit Games athletes, if CrossFit Games continues to be a thing. We don't know. We don't know. But you've also worked with athletes who have performed just in different areas. Like, I think one of the things that was interesting for me was, like, when we were messing around with breakdancing a little bit, it was just like, there's not like a finish line here, No,
there really isn't. And I think that's that. So one of the things that I've been talking about lately is that people feel safe when they have clarity, right? But finding clarity is a lifetime process because everything is constantly changing. Once you reach one point, you're ready for the next point, and things change. Life comes at you. So if clarity is the name of the game, but clarity is a long-lasting process that is ever changing, then what we need to focus on is the process itself. Yeah. So anytime one is coaching, like, for example, for me, if I'm coaching an athlete, all I'm focusing on is what is the process to help you find clarity, rather than trying to tell you what the outcome should be or how to find clarity. I just want you to become process-oriented. And if you can become process-oriented, what ends up happening is that now you can follow a program that maybe you guys offer, and you can do what's prescribed. That's the process. And then within the process, gain the clarity.
So let's say someone comes up to you and they say, Carl, I'm not happy with how I look. I want to lose 15 pounds. Or I want to run a half marathon in under 2 hours. Yep. That's not the process.
That's not the process, but it is part of the vision. So you can say, I want to lose 15 pounds. Right? I want to go down in weight because in my head, that metric is a key performance indicator that means that I'm moving towards my goal. Right. Right? But then we know that if you start training and you actually start eating and you start doing probably everything that you guys are prescribing here, especially for runners when you guys are talking about strength and conditioning, is as you're losing weight and fat, you're potentially gaining some weight and mass and muscle. Right. So the loss of weight becomes a faulty metric.
Right, because all of a sudden your body composition has changed, so the weight could not have oscillated as much, but you actually might be healthier and stronger.
Right. So all of a sudden, that idea of losing 15 pounds was not the right metric to chase. So we need to find another one. And what ends up happening, before we go down that rabbit hole, is that people set this goal, and they're standing right here. They begin moving towards it. Most people fall off, and they don't fall off because they stop practicing, but the expectation that they had of losing the weight, because it's coming so slow or it's moving so slow, they can't see the forest for the trees, and they get caught in what I call the expectation gap.
Okay.
And the expectation gap is when you think your performance should look, feel a certain way, and then in reality it doesn't.
Interesting.
You're like, today I have to be on this pace. You go out and run, you're like, oh my God, I have this nagging injury, or I don't feel well, I'm sick, or it's a little colder, or you know what, I happen to be somewhere where the terrain is not the same terrain I've been training in, and all of a sudden you're like, man, I'm doing so poorly.
Yeah.
And now you start getting disappointed.
So that's really interesting, because in the beginning, you could say for most athletes, they almost see a linear curve of progress, right? They just like, each day is literally almost better than the next,
It's
especially
incredible.
if they don't have to. I remember going to like the seminar with this like Olympic triathlete coach. He worked with a lot of juniors, and he was trying to de-stress all the coaches, the nervous coaches in the crowd who are working with these kids, and they're like, look, like, make your kids safe and healthy. They're so young and full of everything, like, they just need to smell a training plan and they'll get better. Like, it almost doesn't matter. Like, you just need to put them through the paces and they'll improve. But after a while, training is not linear anymore.
No.
So it feels like I'm doing this and I'm just like punching my head through a brick wall. So how do you change your mindset?
Well, we know that one is better than none.
Yeah.
Right? So doing something once means that you're at least doing it. But then what happens is kind of like with money. How much money do you have to make to feel satisfied? There's a limit to that.
Yeah.
How fast do you have to run? How many medals do you have to win?
Right.
So what ends up happening is that it's not about the number. It's about what you experience in the process of achieving the number. The number may never arrive, but because you're so process-oriented and you're feeling the thing that you wanted to feel at the end already, you're never disappointed. And if something goes wrong, you always have the mindset of, oh yeah, I'm process-oriented, I'm solution-conscious. All I have to do is just show up tomorrow again. And now the growth may be slow, or may even take you on a complete tangent.
Right.
But the feeling inside of you performing at the highest level is still there. So we need to start identifying performance through feel first.
Is this something that has come naturally for you yourself, or is this something that you have struggled with yourself as an athlete?
I've lived a life of disappointment. Okay, I'm so dissatisfied with myself, and this is true. I'm so dissatisfied with myself that I continue the pursuit. The good news is that I have arrived at a place at my older age where the dissatisfaction is just me realizing that I care a lot.
Okay, so you're trying to turn this disappointment into something that's like, no, I'm just invested in this and I really care about how I feel and think and do.
So the question is, what is it that I care about? Okay, I care about being mobile, meaning that I can move from here to there.
Yeah.
I care about looking cool while doing it. I like looking cool.
Yeah.
So what do I have to do to be cool? Do I have to break dance? Do I have to run? Do I have to shoot a video? Do we have to put some epic music on it and make it seem cool?
Yeah, if you talk to Charlie Rocket, runners are not...
They're not that cool.
They're not that cool. Sorry, guys.
We're all kind of
He's not
nerds.
hanging out with the right ones.
That's right. That's right.
it.
That's right. We're all kind of nerds. So you need to figure out what it is that you really care about.
Yeah.
And then do that, whatever it is that you do, running, gymnastics, CrossFit, strength training, coaching, art, music, whatever it may be, because you care. And then you have to also realize what impact is that making in your life and other people's lives. First it has to be for you, like put your mask on first, and then see how it's contributing.
Like you're in the airplane, put your own oxygen mask on before you help others.
Yeah, so you first start behaving a certain way that brings you the satisfaction, and you have a mental process that allows you to feel what's going on, and then translate how you're associating your thoughts with the feelings. And realize that you can change it by asking yourself a simple question that is, for what? Okay, you want to complete a marathon? For what? Because you want to feel challenged? Great. For what? Oh, because if I do this, I know that I can be accountable. Okay, for what? Well, I happen to be someone that in relationships, I don't stick with one person long enough, and I want to be accountable. All of a sudden, you start seeing your practice as a runner transcend into other aspects of your life. And that's where the universal prescription of performance is not technique-based, it's not craft-based, but human-based. It's what is the human experience? And I think that's one of the reasons why the run experience is so powerful, is because you're literally selling people on focus on the experience, not on the outcome.
Yeah.
And here are some tools to be able to experience running at a higher level.
Yeah.
And I think that's why we need a balance.
I mean, everyone on here, you don't just run, you interact with other people all the time. And I think it's interesting to ask, like, what does running do for yourself? But what does you pursuing this thing, what does that allow you to be for other people in your life?
Yeah. And I think this is a big one. So someone's commenting here. Gina seems to be saying, good to hear this stuff you already know out loud from professionals.
I'll take that.
We're pretend professionals, okay? I think this is the other thing, is that we're all trying to figure it out. Bottom line is, what we're saying here is we're simply acting as observers and articulating what it is that we're observing.
Yeah.
So when one is performing, let's say you go out for a run, the story that you're telling yourself, the conversation that you're having internally, if you can put that in a way where it's observational, you're actually talking about what is happening with your body, you can change. You can decide, I can run fast. You know what? I'm feeling a surge right now. I have the runner's high. Let me run a little faster. Oh man, I'm in pain. Okay, well, you know what? You can shorten your step. We can change directions right now to not go this way. You can walk.
Right.
And because you are choosing consciously to change, you are a proactive participant in the process, and therefore you cannot be disappointed because you chose.
Okay.
And this is where the mindset of a lot of people feel like if they choose, they lose. Like, if I focus on only one thing, I'm going to lose out. I'm going to miss out on all these other things. But if you choose, you win. Because if you choose and you pay attention to what's happening, now you start seeing that the way you do one thing is how you do everything. And that now you are in control of your performance. And when you're in control of your performance, you feel safe. And when you feel safe, you can see clearly. And when you can see clearly, you can move towards something. And I think that's where now we can start changing the story that we have in our head.
Right.
Which will change our actions, our behavior, and ultimately align with the true intention that we have for practicing or performing in the first place.
So let's say a runner is getting ready for a half or a full marathon. It's like one of their first times, and they're feeling good, and they're executing their program. Yeah. And they feel this sense of performance, and potentially they feel like really in their body, and it feels good.
During the race, you mean? Or?
Just even in the training.
Okay, in the training.
They're like executing. It's like when the athlete comes into the gym for a couple weeks, they start to feel like, oh man, I can do pull-ups. I never thought I could. Like, cool. I feel really good. I'm in it. And that gives that person a sense of clarity. But let's say they have to skip a day, right? Or they're out for a couple of days, or something. They step in a pothole and they twist their ankle, and all of a sudden they can't run. That person now all of a sudden feels like they've gotten pushed back a little bit.
Yep, 100%.
But you're saying something about choice in the matter.
Yep.
They can choose to be proactive in the process of getting themselves out of injury, or like accepting the reality of that?
Accepting doesn't mean that you are accepting defeat.
Right.
Accepting is simply acknowledging what is. And realizing that now you can move towards it, away from it, or against it. Usually moving against that is being reactive. Moving away from it is being avoidant. It doesn't get you closer.
So if I'm moving away from the injury, it's just like, I'm good. I'm just gonna, put some ice on it and run tomorrow and hope it goes away.
Right. So I'll give you a personal example. Today's my second day that I haven't worked out, that I haven't trained. So this morning I was like, what the hell, Carl? You haven't trained in 2 days. Yeah. You said you were going to do these things, and life has simply been throwing me some curveballs in the past 3 days that I haven't made it to the gym. I had to prioritize. It was just me putting out fires. So instead of being, oh man, Carl, you're not training, you're going in the wrong direction, you're crashing now, this is over, you're defeated, you're a loser, I'm more so thinking, oh, wait a second, if what's happening here in the last 3 days is the norm, then I can choose to change my schedule. I can shift things. I can shift gears. Or I can also say, you know what, it was only 2 days, I can make up for it on the back end. You know what? This Saturday, I'm actually not traveling out of town. I'm going to be in town. That means I can fit in a training session on Saturday and make up for the day that I missed.
Yeah.
And just because I know that I have the choice, I'm in control and I feel empowered. And I think that's a very important aspect of performance.
How do you help athletes understand that they do have a choice? Because so often, especially with newer athletes and runners, they're like, no, the plan says this. I have to do this because it's what it says. And if I don't, oh my God, I'm not going to make it. And everything's going to blow up, etc. Like, how do you get that person? And I think this is so important for what we're talking about today from a longer-term motivational standpoint. Like, how do you get them in the driver's seat?
Yeah, there's a difference here between knowledge and understanding. That's the first part, is that a lot of people have a lot of knowledge. Like if you have a program, all of a sudden you have some knowledge. We have Google, we have knowledge. But understanding is knowledge in context. Context is your individualized experience. So the first thing I need to do as a coach is individualize the experience that the athlete is having.
I see this program online. This says I need to do this type of run on Saturday and this type of run on Wednesday. I have my own life. This is where I'm at. How do I marry these two together?
Right. And you can give examples like, we wouldn't be doing medical research and funding medical research if we already had the solutions. Like, we're just trying to figure this out. The prescription today is not the same prescription that's going to be tomorrow. So just because there's a program that says, here's how you're going to run your first 5K in 30 days or whatever it may be, that is just a guideline.
Right.
And you need to be adaptive around that. Now, how do you get them emotionally invested? Well, you have to realize where they're at. Some athletes are in the child phase, where they need to be handheld. You need to guide them and explain to them, here are your basic needs. Here's how we are operating. This is what you should do. And then they feel safe and secure, and they feel like they're moving the needle. Some are in the teenage phase, where they're like, screw it. I know I have to run. I know how many miles I have to accumulate this week so I can be ready for my race.
Right.
So then they say, you know what? Screw you, coach. I'm going to go do my thing.
I got my stuff.
Right, I got my stuff. And
I don't like that workout. I don't think that's going to get me ready.
That's fine. And instead of trying to control an athlete that is at a teenage phase, you just let them go do your thing. And just let them go. Eventually, they come back when they get to the point where they become adults. And they say, you know what? I can't do this alone. In fact, I also want to feel like I belong to something bigger, a community. I want to have a dialogue about this. And then they have a new set of needs. So you need to meet people where they're at.
I love that.
Yeah.
Guys, where do you think you're at? Why don't you drop that in the comments? Are you in the child phase, the teenage phase, or the adult phase?
I mean, I think about this all the time. I think about this in business. I think about this in finances. I think about relationships.
I definitely went through a strong teenage phase with coaching. You know,
where you felt like, personally, I got all the answers.
Yeah, and also, like, there were certain people who were mentors for me that I needed to, like, step away from. And it's just, like, I need to, like, assert my independence. And even if I'm going to do some dumb things, I, like, need to go out. Because, like, the teenage phase, it's not... And I'm not saying you're doing this. You could almost infer that it's a negative phase.
Yeah, for sure. People infer that it's a negative phase, but it's not.
But it's not a negative phase. It's almost like you have to go through the teenage phase to become an adult. Like, you can't skip it.
Yeah, you can't appreciate.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there's a degree of independence you have to go through. GD came out and says, adult.
That's
Elizabeth says child, totally. And Martin is like, screw your question, any advice for the first 24-hour race?
Screw you.
Yeah. Jeffrey says, I've gone full circle from independently running training to group training back to running on my own.
Okay, so that's an interesting piece here, because just because you've gone from being independent to running with a group to now being independent again, doesn't mean that you're necessarily in the teenage phase when it comes to your performance.
Right.
Because the best athletes in the world wake up and train alone because there's a lot of stuff that you can do alone.
Yep.
That's the grind.
Yeah.
That's the stuff that you do when no one's watching, no one's looking. That's a even higher level of adulthood.
You know what I also think is interesting is that there's many cycles of this.
Yes.
So I just got to spend a couple days in Mammoth Lakes a couple weeks ago filming Alexi Pappas, who is... she's a 31, 36, 10K runner. She ran, it's fast.
Wow.
She ran in Rio.
That's my 1K.
Yeah. And she is out of college only a few years now. And so she's like kind of new pro. And she went to move to Mammoth because she wanted to train with Dina and Andrew Castor. And Dina is, in a lot of ways, she's like the matriarch of women's American long distance running. Like she has still like the female American record. She's probably 15 years older than where Dina is right now. And so Alexi is going to marathon school, you know? So one level, like, and I watch them train next to each other, and I'm seeing Alexi who's, you know, ran through high school, ran through college, has been to the Olympics, but now all of a sudden she's almost going back through that like child phase for being a professional marathon runner.
Yeah, and I think this is where being specific about where you're at in your stage of development is extremely important. And going back to Charlie Rocket, he knew exactly how specific he wanted to be to define what being an athlete was. For her, she's now redefining what performance means to her. So she's like, okay, women, marathon, it's very specific. So I think being specific about the outcome that you want to see will give you more clarity and structure in your process.
Yeah.
That's it.
That's so interesting.
And
I
it's
really
really cool.
like it formulated that way.
Yeah.
You know, I remember talking to some coaches early on, and sometimes like you guys go to classes and like you have your experience of things from the coach. You know, the same thing. Like I coach a very talkative class on Monday mornings.
Everyone
They've
needs
been
to
there
share.
for years, and for me, every once in a while, I get caught up. It's like, oh man, they're not listening to me. Like they're not doing this. This is like some like are they being disrespectful? Are they being rude? And I have to realize, like, wait a minute, like it's not about me here, right? Like they're here to like talk to each other, and they're like this is their social hour for the day.
Yeah.
So it's like I almost want to be the person who like guides the class, gives them some things, but then steps out of the way and makes sure they have that good experience. And then for me, where I'm working on my coaching is when do I intervene and when do I leave them alone?
Well, it's very interesting that you're saying this. So Logan Gelbrick, owner of Deuce Gym, someone that's also going to be on the podcast actually next week.
Oh, I'm excited for that one.
Yeah. He one of his passions is high performing teams, right? Like he loves high performance and he loves teams. And one of the things that he told me that was very interesting, he said that back in the day when he was playing baseball, they would call the team for a meeting or to train or practice at, let's say, 1 o'clock.
Yeah.
Right? So they would show up at 1 o'clock. At 1 o'clock, they get there. Everyone's kind of rowdy. Everyone's talking to each other. They're shooting the shit and just having a good time. And then all of a sudden, there's a dip. There's a lull in the conversation because, okay, they're done kind of talking. And then when that lull happens, the assistant coaches who are on the sideline perceive that, they step in.
Yeah.
And then they say, okay, this is going to start happening like this. There's still conversation going on. And then the captain of either the coaching team or the captain of the team itself, when they realize that there's an even bigger dip, they call in head coach. We're ready. And that's maybe at 1:30.
Interesting.
So let's say you're teaching a class on Monday mornings. You just let them, hey, we're going for a run. We're just in it. You just give them very vague structure. You don't have to say anything. Once the lull happens, you know they're ready. Now I can tell you what we're doing. I think that's pretty cool. So
I have to try that more. I think that's cool. Logan, you are a clever individual right there.
Yes. And these are technical components to helping people adhere to a process.
Yeah.
Because we can't control people.
No.
So how do we navigate the ocean? Well, we need to know how to read the ocean, the wind, the stars, our tools.
As a former sailor.
There you go. I'm trying to relate.
Speaking my language, Carl.
There you go.
Speaking my language.
Hopefully that's helpful. And the reason I share this with you is because I know that every single person watching here, regardless of it being in running or anything else, they have their own tools and they have their own ocean and world to navigate. And to realize that you have the opportunity to do that. So become technical, through the technical, learn how you can become more adaptive to your process, whatever that is. And the more specific you become about the outcome, the more motivated you'll be.
I love it. Guys, we haven't talked about our giveaway yet. This week, if you click the link down in the description, YouTube, you'll have one of two people to get a 3-month training club membership, which is a perfect time to train for that half marathon if you're that new runner and you just want to give yourselves a few months to get started really the right way. We would love to be your guide, and you will get a lot of this guidance and hand-holding you need. If you're in those later phases, we've got an incredible community to support you and participate in and be that. So go in there and get it. And the way you enter is you can actually go check out the podcast that we did together. And while you are there, you should definitely subscribe to Carl's podcast.
Yeah, and then the other thing that to me is super important, especially with this podcast, is I want to connect with people. The same way we're reading comments here, with the podcast, there's no platform really to connect.
So connect on Instagram.
Yeah, so one of the things that I've been telling people is take a screenshot of you listening or take a picture of yourself as you're out running and listening to the podcast, and then post it to stories, and then tag you and myself, and then I can connect with people. That's the biggest thing that I want to see happen is the community building. I just think it's such a big deal.
You have such a gift for that. And so guys, listen, tag him, talk to him on Instagram at Carl Paoli. That's another way to enter the giveaway. You can go ahead and visit his profile. He would love to see that, and I would love to see that. That'd be great.
Yeah, and you know what? I actually learned the other day that someone that I've been working on we've been working on a project together, she found me through the run experience.
Oh.
And I was like, that's amazing.
That's cool.
So to me, that was a big win. And I was like, oh man, that's so cool to see that happen.
Yeah. I love that. That's so great. So, we've got another 15 minutes here, and I wanted to get into just some of these other comments or questions here.
What do we got?
I was trying to look at this just to see. Jeff says, I've gone full circle from independently running, training to group training, back to running on my own. Mm-hmm. Gina says, young adult. Baby says, I think I'm the child phase. I love all the distinctions. Teenager phase. Which one is this? Is there a toddler phase? Here we go. This is what I wanted to talk about. It's Josie Linda. Where you're trying to get started running but have no idea what you're doing.
Yeah.
That's a really, like people who have been running for a long time and it's somewhat habituated, they can get knocked down and they can go through months of frustration, but their identity with running is so tied in that from a motivation standpoint, it's more motivating them to correct maybe some of the imbalances or reasons why they were hurt. But I'm not necessarily worried about them totally falling off the wagon. For this person, it's different.
It is very different.
And there's a ton of information out there, but it's almost overwhelming.
Yes. The information is noise, unfortunately. Yeah. So we need to go from information to concept. What's the concept? The concept is to run. Okay, for what? Well, I just want to feel active. Okay. Put that on your schedule every day. What does that look like? Does that look like walking around the block? Walk around the block.
Yeah.
If you got to running and now you're, okay, I do the same run. I don't want to do it. Run up the hill. You may do a quarter of the run, but it's going to feel different. So variety is important. But there needs to be accountability. So how do you develop the habit of accountability? Well, for me, it's kind of like, if it's on the schedule, I go.
Okay.
For me, that's how I operate.
So in this respect, you would write it on your schedule. Do you program your schedule what time you're working out?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So if my calendar says I'm working out, then I go and work out. Unless something drastic happens.
How far ahead? Do you have like an auto-repeating calendar, or do you kind of like set it differently depending on your week?
Weekly. Yeah, it's a weekly thing.
So like some days I might work out at 10, and then another days, I can't do it till later.
Yes. So it's a weekly thing. The other thing for me, accountability happens through relationships. So I want to be accountable to the people I'm working with or talking to or engaging with. So if we say, hey, we're getting together at 10 to do this thing, I will be there at 10.
Yeah.
Like I don't miss an appointment.
Yeah.
So people need to figure out what is it that's going to keep them accountable.
Yeah.
And to call themselves out on the bullshit that they're telling themselves about, oh, why I can't make it today, or I'm tired, or whatever it may be. And this is where there's levels. And we know that 21 days is, if you can do that for 21 days, show up consistently 21 days, you will now have a habit created. But you need 66 days for the habit to stick.
Okay, so 21 days is the initial phase of getting this somewhat ingrained, and then 66 days is when it becomes more of a, I don't know if permanent is the right word.
Well, it does become permanent. It becomes part of your neural pathways, basically.
Oh, wow.
You start thinking about it. You chemically change.
Yeah. Oh, wow.
So this is just like anything. and one of the, you've probably seen it, like 90 days. Right. Okay.
Yeah.
P90X or whatever they call it. Yeah. Beach body. But setting a goal maybe that's 100 days out is good because you are going to fall off.
Right.
So even if you don't check the box every day, as long as within the 100 days you've checked out 66 times, then you will be on a path.
And I think that context is helpful because there might be some days within those 100 where you don't feel like you're making progress. But knowing that even if you're just logging it, you know what I mean? It's like there's going to be some positive benefit to that.
Yes. And it's when you feel like utter crap, being able to say, oh, I feel like utter crap right now.
Yeah.
I don't feel good. And be like, okay, that's why meditation is important. That's why becoming in tune with who you are is important. Being able to distinguish between the thoughts and what's real.
Yeah.
You have to ask yourself, is what I'm thinking and feeling real?
Yeah.
And you need to figure out a way to process that. Is that going for a run? Awesome. Is that writing it down? Is that talking it out with someone?
You know, it's funny you say that because there are times where, we go through different levels of stress.
For sure.
And, sometimes with my wife, I'll be like, I feel stressed right now. And it's just something about like vocalizing it that it takes a little edge off. And one of the things I've learned messing around with a little bit of meditation stuff the last couple of years is like, you're not trying to change the feeling that you're currently in. Like, you're not trying to change the state. You're just saying, like, I'm tired right now. Or I'm stressed right now. You just, like, note it. And there's just something about noting it that, again, just files some of the sharp edges down. Yeah,
that is basic awareness.
Yeah.
And I think when one becomes aware, in some way, they feel in control.
That was my next question. Yeah. Do you associate awareness with control?
100%. And then you can even take it further and be like, oh, what am I in control exactly of? Well, I can't control necessarily my heart rate just directly by thinking, okay, I want you to beat faster, but I can change my breathing, which will affect my heart rate.
So
I can change the way that I move.
Control is as much about knowing what you can't control in a lot of ways, and understanding the few levers that you can pull.
And we don't know what we don't know.
Yeah. So I always had these distinct feelings. I remember you talking to Charlie about his Ironman, and he's out there for a long time. In those extended events, and for you guys doing ultras, it's like there's certain things you can't do, but like you're gonna go through these really bad patches, and it's just you don't know if or when. It's like someone is like hiding behind a tree with a big stick, and they're just gonna hit you somewhere, and you don't know if it's gonna be in the belly or in your knee or like right in the forehead. You're like, I'm gonna get smacked a few times in this race. And the only things I really have to control are like, okay, I can change my breathing.
Yep.
I could stop and walk, shake out my shoulders. I could try to change how my body's moving a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
I could put something in my mouth.
Yep.
I could eat something.
Yep.
I could drink something. And then noting that bad experience and knowing that you'll be able to ride out of it.
Yeah, and I think this is where it's important to keep in mind that whether it's a good feeling or experience that you're having or a bad experience that you're having, this too shall pass.
So what about people who feel like they've started a program and then they've fallen off and now they feel kind of ashamed?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that is a big one. So sitting in your shame is extremely powerful. This is something Brene Brown talks about, the power of vulnerability.
Yeah.
And simply being able to say, you know what? Oh man, I dropped off of this great eating habit I was on, or I was on this program and I was, going for this half marathon or a 5K or a marathon, and I've dropped off. Being able to acknowledge that to yourself and publicly is super powerful, because what it does is it chemically changes you right away, and it allows you to take ownership of that.
Yeah.
But you have to sit in shame first to be able to realize,
acknowledge it,
and then you have to articulate it outward. But if you keep it inside, what ends up happening is that you start telling yourself a story that's potentially not true. Because you may have dropped off the program for a legit reason.
Right. Something that potentially was out of your control, your mom and something, or a parent, and then something happened to your child, and all of a sudden you're like, all my free time for training has just gone away unexpected for a week or two.
Yeah, and I think this is why having a really good sense of purpose will allow you to appreciate why you're making certain decisions.
Where does kindness fit into this? We haven't really touched on that yet.
So I think that kindness is
or
appreciation.
Or is that something that you think that you
100%. So this is what I usually say is that I teach this like muscle up seminar.
Yeah.
So in the beginning of the seminar, I say, okay, I want to do a social experiment, and I ask people. First of all, I ask people who here can do a muscle up. The majority of people attending the class can do a muscle up.
Now,
just like the majority
it used to
of
not
people,
be that way.
Yeah. The majority of people watching this right now
can run.
Mm-hmm. Right? You're a runner. You can run. So why the hell are you here? I want to know more. Okay, great, fantastic. So if you want to know more, that means that you're already open. You're willing to be confused or to hear something that's going to challenge your belief system.
Yeah.
So that's one side. The other side of the coin is, who here cannot run a 5K? Who here cannot run a marathon? Who here cannot do a muscle up?
Yeah.
Some people raise their hand. So what I say is, okay, let's pick an individual from the group, and I tell them, go ahead and do a muscle up right now. You're like, I can't do it. I was like, well, what would it look like if you had to do a muscle up with what you got here right now?
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, maybe it defaults to, well, I'll use some bands, or I'll have someone spot me and pick me up and put me over the rings. Eventually, they get to the top and they do the muscle up with assistance in some way. They figure it out.
Right.
So you need to become first solution conscious. And then I ask them, did you do a muscle up? And they're like, yeah, but.
There was an asterisk.
Yeah, and the but is an eraser. Yes, I did it, but. And this is where we need to change the mindset and be appreciative of what we can currently do. Because if we can't appreciate our current level of performance, we have no business packing anything on top of that.
That's interesting.
Yeah, so that's kindness.
Yes, I ran, but I think the course was a little short.
Yeah,
yes,
exactly.
Yes, I won the race, but I don't think it was very competitive.
That's the person that's not going to make it. Because they have a lack of appreciation for what they currently have. You have no business having more money. You have no business getting fitter. You have no business getting faster. Because you're not willing to accept and see and respect what you currently have as your base of performance in this very moment.
That's really, really interesting.
And that's the kindness. Are you able to give yourself space to appreciate, just like the value of your home, you buy a home, you hope that the value appreciates.
Yeah.
In this case, it's the same thing. Can you appreciate what you currently have to see the value grow?
So bringing it back to Mammoth Lakes, I'm around all these young guns, young bucks right out of college.
Killing it.
well, wanting to. They may not be killing it yet, but they're trying to make it as a professional runner. Very different from the high school coaching relationships. They're big boys and girls. They don't have a coach overseeing everything. They really have to manage it, and some people really struggle with the pressure they put on themselves. And meanwhile, here's Dina Castor, who is 20 years their senior and still running and still training for marathons at a high level. And she's not training for the Olympics anymore, but she's training for Masters. And I was sitting in the follow-on car with her husband, Andrew, who's coached her for years. And I'm like, how long is Dina going to keep going? She's like, as long as it's fun, we keep going.
See, so that's a core value that they stick to. And now running is not a task, but a lifestyle. And what they're doing is they're designing a lifestyle. And they're asking themselves very basic questions. So in design, one of the things that we want to ask ourselves is this feasible? Can I run a marathon? Yes. Yeah. Is this viable? Do I have the resources? Yeah. Do I have the time? Do I have the money? Do I have the space? And then ultimately, and this is the biggest question that most people fail to ask themselves correctly, is this desirable? Because a lot of people put this pressure on themselves thinking, I need to become a professional runner. I need to run it in this time. And guess what? That's a made-up story that you have, and it's not what you actually desire. It's what someone planted in your brain and made you think that that's what you desire. So if you have a lack of awareness, a lack of appreciation, a lack of process, you will have a lack of clarity in what you're experiencing and realizing whether what you're doing is something that you really want or not.
So it sounds like the hard work here is actually not the hard work of training. It's having some clarity in these areas. And I'm willing to guess this is not a 5-minute exercise. I figured it out now, and it is done. I can just leave that alone and always revisit it.
Right.
This is something that is morphing and changing. And is really like a practice.
It is. And I mean, when I did gymnastics growing up, the way that I practiced gymnastics is very different than the way that I practice gymnastics now. But the value practicing gymnastics brings me is the same or greater than when I was a kid practicing technically at a higher level.
Yeah. I went through a phase of putting a lot of pressure on myself as a runner and trying to compete, and you met me when I was kind of just coming out of it. And now I really enjoy like running hard. Like I've got 2 hard runs in this week with like some good workouts, but I don't feel the same edge or pressure anymore. And right now running is just a level of enjoyment. Maybe because I get to run with Nora a lot and I just watch her run around. It's just like I like enjoy it. And there are days where it's maybe I'm not performing as well. I just don't have that pressure anymore.
Yeah. And I think what
I don't know if this is going to last, but I'm just enjoying it right now. And I'm just trying to recognize that I'm in a good running spot, guys.
I think that's awesome. And I think it's because I believe just like this camera right now is on a tripod, in our life we have our passion, the thing that we love doing. We have our profession, is the thing that we do in exchange for value. Yeah. And then we have our vocation, which is the contribution. Yeah. And those 3 things are the 3 legs of a tripod. If your profession was running, it will get to a point where the exchange of tasks, that's where you're always going to feel friction. But it's in your passion where you feel free, and it's in your vocation where you're contributing, where you feel good. Yeah. So it's in that profession where things start to get a little sticky. So if you were thinking about professionally running, of course there's going to be moments where you just have to grind, and it feels a little crappy, but you can get over it. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, man,
you transition to passion. That's what I'm saying.
Well, we're going to have to bring an end on that in a lot of ways. It is 101, ladies and runner gentlemen. We could keep talking for sure. I'll have to have you back on again.
Happy.
That's so
happy
fun.
to
It's
come
so fun,
back
Carl. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
Guys, remember, we're going to do our drawing from last week's giveaway, which is a limited edition, super cool running hat.
Yes.
I love this hat, actually. This thing is great.
I actually seen you wear this hat.
And we are giving away some winners there. And, of course, you can still enter the giveaway for next week. If you're listening to the recording of this, you still have between now and next week, the 21st, to enter as well. We'll do the drawing at the end. And while you're there, you might as well subscribe to Carl's podcast, say hi to him on Instagram, and listen to our episode. I think for you runner people, I think Charlie's episode will be really fascinating. And of course, if you want to know a little bit more about me and my background, you can go ahead and give that a listen as well.
Very cool.
Let's do 2 winners for this one. Let's see what we got.
Boom.
We have Tanae, congratulations, you're a winner of our TRE hat, and Arnold Flores from Manistee, California. So Tanae from Hampton, Virginia, Arnold from Menifee, California. Congratulations, guys. We will get you your TRE hats in the mail. You hungry?
Yes, let's go eat.
I'm hungry too, guys. We're going to go get some lunch. Thanks as always for tuning in. You had some great questions and comments in there. Appreciate you guys. We'll be online, and we'll see you next week.
Thank you.
There we go. That was a bad transition because I have another thing here.
You're going to have to send Craig away.
I know. That's what he said. You're going to have to send Craig away again. Oh, Edward.